We are at the time of the Great Awakening, and one of the things that we maybe don't really think about is that there's a lot of chaos and turbulence in the Great Awakening. There's a lot of change and deconstruction, and the ways that would support the new, very sensitive souls that are coming onto the planet to be living in a well way don't exist yet, and that we're recreating them through the process of refining our own consciousness. And so we're going to have a beautiful conversation today with the hosts of the Beyond the Illusion podcast, Tianna Roser and Tim Howe. Join us to find out more.
Soul Nectar Show. The Soul Nectar Show. You're invited, delighted to discover who you are. Anything is possible if you believe. So join us on this beautiful journey. Soul Nectar Show. Soul Nectar Show.
Well, hello, hello, hello. Welcome everybody to another episode of Soul Nectar Show. That show where we talk about all things essence. We sit around the campfire and we share stories of our experience on Earth and what it's been like. And boy, do we have some stories to tell being on the planet at this time of the Great Awakening and all that that entails. And from my perspective, as a mother, mentor, medicine woman, boy, it does entail a whole lot of chaos and turbulence and stuff that looks like mental illness, family systems divided, all kinds of craziness with our kids and plant medicines going everywhere. And so everyone's looking for a solution, right, to deal with the experience of going through the awakening collectively. And I'm your host, Carrie Hummingbird, and you know I love to have these conversations week after week after week. And I really, my strongest desire is that anyone listening to this, you get some piece of wisdom, you get something that gets you through to the next day, to the next week, something that it makes a light bulb go off, like, wow, okay, I'm finally getting this piece. I can accept this now. I can come at this from a different place. And so today's conversation is really going to be centering around this great awakening experience that we're all in. How do we care for ourselves? How do we care for our kids when we're in the middle of deconstructing literally everything? There's so much chaos and turbulence. And yet, don't we all want to feel safe and grounded too in the middle of all that and have a safe landing for our kids and future descendants? This is my mama's heart talking. And, you know, I have these beautiful friends who decided, yeah, I'm going to come and have this conversation with you, Mama Bear Carrie. Let's have this conversation and see how we can bring some light to this. So today on the show, we have Tianna Roser, who's been on the show before, and you guys might remember that she is a Reiki and hypnosis and life between lives regression and quantum healing hypnosis technique person. She's the author of the book Awakening Transformation. Perfect person to be in this conversation, as well as your podcast host. They have a podcast called Beyond the Illusion together, and Tim Howe is also here with us, and he's a dad, and he's a father to, you know, his daughter, and, you know, is also aware of all of these trends and had his own awakening process he was going through. So you guys might remember the last episode. I will put a link in the show notes below, as well as my interview with them on the Beyond the Illusion podcast. So go check that out. But in the meantime, welcome you guys to the show. I know this is a big topic. We're taking off a big bite of the elephant today. So I want to honor you both for being in this conversation with me. And I know that you're going to bring such great wisdom. Who wants to start? Who's got something about this you want to share?
Yeah, I can start. Yeah, thank you, Carrie. I really appreciate it. And yeah, I think that is everything you just spoke about is a lot. It's a lot for everyone to deal with. And I'm reminded of that, especially when I think about other people's experiences in life, that when I'm going through my own, struggles and difficulties, mine, I'm a Taurus, so a lot of my angst and challenges come from what I perceive as the real world, the everyday mundane like existence that we have to walk through with our bodies. And I feel the tension and the pull of all these things that are happening within that sphere. and that's where I experience my growth. And I know it's not like that for everyone. Maybe a lot of people experience things in their mind or in their emotions or in different areas of their life. And I'm reminded of that when, when you speak about things like you just spoke about in the intro there, that not everyone experiences, their life the same way, and that my struggles sort of pale in comparison to other people's. And that's just the journey that we all chose to take, so I always have to remind myself of that when I'm experiencing a day that's, much like earlier today, where it felt like nothing was going right, like everything that could go wrong felt like it did. And, that can be a little discouraging and get you down. But, in the big picture, it's nothing. It's like it's just a blip. And you won't even remember it the next day most times. So uh yeah, I have to say, these bigger I love talking about these bigger kind of issues because we need to address these things that are happening to not just to maybe just individuals, but to all of us collectively. So yeah, that's kind of where I sit with that, at least right now. And yeah, and I come to this conversation, with an open heart and an open mind, and just hopefully, something comes through that someone else can take something away from.
That's beautiful.
It's
Thanks.
interesting, like you're saying, like it's an intense time to be on the planet right now. And no matter what age you are, but of course, like my perspective is that there's all these like old souls, and maybe even souls that are not from Earth, right? From other star systems, maybe very advanced souls that have come in being born in the last 20 or 30 years. And so you have these like really sensitive souls that have a high consciousness, but they don't have the years of earthly experience to ground that. So there's like this deep wisdom and this like maybe like perceiving and receiving a lot of things that maybe my generation or the generation before didn't even have the sensitivity to be able to sense and feel. And so there is like, maybe we don't even know how to guide them because it's very new, because on the planet right now, everything, the veil is thinning. And so we're getting bombarded with these, high frequency spiritual energies, and you have these maybe very sensitive souls, but they haven't had the years of earthly experience yet to sort of ground it. And then here we are trying to guide them through something that we've never been through as well. And so it's kind of that kind of chaos where we're all figuring it out as we go along, and it's a little messy.
Yeah, I mean, Tim, I totally relate to that what you said, Tianna, and Tim as well. It's like I have a former like my south node is what I'm comfortable with, right? Like that's what I already know. Virgo. Like I can totally get stuff done. Like I am competent. I can get in there. I'm grounded on earth. I can make stuff happen. I know how to like produce a podcast and do like I've got an octopus. I got an arm on all these things, right? I'm doing this, I'm doing this. I got this thing going on. I got the other thing going on, and I'm like doing all this kind of stuff. But not but I'm not mystic. Like I'm just opening up the mystic part of me, and the mystic part of me is like opening up and I'm getting all these insights, but I don't like see visions. I just know, I just feel and I just know, but I'm mostly in this grounded space. So when I'm with people that are like don't have that skill, they go, how do you do all that stuff, right? Like Tim, all the stuff you take for granted, like it's actually quite skillful, to be able to function on earth, like holding down a job, putting food on the table, being a dad. That's like real stuff, for a lot of these souls coming in, like that is not easy.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, and that's why Tiana and I feel like we have a good, synergistic experience in our podcast, because I do embody that aspect of reality more, I think, than she does, and she embodies the mystical and maybe even the mind part of reality as well. And so, we come together, and she tends to, bring an angle to the conversation that I don't have usually. So that's what's good about I think what we have going on. But it's also like what she said earlier. You talked about, Tiana, you talked about how people are coming into the earth who haven't had this earthly experience too. So that I think feel that like that also plays into it, because I do feel like I have been here many, many times. And so I think that gives us like a little bit of a leg up too in some areas. So because we know what to expect here, we know that how heavy the energy can be, and we know how to deal with that. But the newer souls, and I have read this in many books, and especially in Dolores Cannon's books, where she talks about how many of the new souls coming in don't have that much earth experience. So I feel like that actually is happening, and I've even noticed it with people that I know, and they've told me that like they've had that feeling like they haven't been here before, like this is maybe their first time or second or whatever, not very many times here, and so um, and maybe that's not even how it works. Maybe it's like simultaneously we're having a ton of experiences, like so who really knows? But I don't want to go too deep on that. So let's just say these souls are not as experienced as other souls, and so yeah, they can have, like, really different challenges that we have. They can live in a world that maybe does feel super heavy, and when something comes up that other people seem to deal with just fine, they can't deal with it, and so they maybe hold that against themselves in some way, and, that's not really fair to themselves either, so I think it's our responsibility to find out, like, how people are feeling and how they're making their way through the world and through their challenges, because that's the one thing we all have in common is that nobody gets out of the challenge part of it. Nobody does. We all have that in common, and even though some people might make it look like they don't have any, they do. So there's always that, but yeah, yeah, that was my point. Sorry.
Doing QHHT and past life regression and life between lives, yeah, I think I travel, with clients a lot into different lifetimes, non-earthly lifetimes, and a lot of the other, I mean, of course, everything possible out there, but people often say that Earth is one of the more difficult schools, and that the vibration here is more dense or heavier than a lot of other realms. And clients will go into a lifetime in these non-earthly realms where there's just harmony and peace, and they're playing and creating, and they don't have to try to survive. That's like a huge thing about Earth that's not true for a lot of the other realms, that so much of our energy is spent trying to just for survival, right? Why are these people working these jobs that they don't like just so that they can eat and they can have shelter and survive? And so these things aren't necessarily present in a lot of the other realities. And so I see people struggling with that. And you can even look, like they have, I don't know all the names for the generations, right? The Gen Z and the millennials, but people have certain kind of ideas like, oh, that generation, they don't work very hard, or they don't have a lot of ambition, or, well, again, these might be these advanced souls that have come from other places, and so that's so foreign to them, this idea of like, why does all this energy have to be spent for survival? Why are we not all in harmony? And another one that I've seen in some of like when I teach like a class or groups of people, there are some souls that are like you're saying, Kara, they're very psychic, they're very spiritual, but then maybe lacking in kind of basic common human skills and having healthy boundaries, because they're not used to that from where they've spent these other lifetimes. And so those things, yeah, connecting to spirit or receiving information beyond the five physical senses, that's a snap for them. But then like how to interact with their fellow human, that's a challenge for them. I've seen a lot of that. And then also I think it's interesting too with like so much autism now, and how what's the spiritual story behind that, and the way that they are communicating in a different way. There's like so many interesting, if we were to like kind of look across culture, maybe little symptoms or signs of showing that what we're talking about.
Yeah, and I think that we should also look at like the difficulty, like what do people do when things are too hard? How do they cope with that? And the expectations on them of their communities, their school systems, their churches. Like there's so many expectations I know I grew up with, I'm pretty sure you guys did. Like this is how you're supposed to do it. This is how you're supposed to like behave, and then you're supposed to be able to get through all your school, and then you're supposed to be able to go to college, and then you're supposed to be able to go and provide your own food and your own shelter. And like for some people that is really challenging, because just being in a work environment with maybe people that don't understand or come to work without processing their emotional content and are walking around, with that kind of fog around them or that anger around them. Let's say, some of these jobs like that don't take a lot of requirement, like you can go there without a college degree, right? But like you're working at Walmart or something, and like uh, people that are working there might not be really processing their stuff, or there might be shopping there, right? And you're kind of in this environment with a lot of like psychic energy that as a bright light is going to be glomming onto you next, right? As like, oh, that's a nice meal over there. Like, so, and I don't think some of these souls are not really able to protect themselves that way either. Like they haven't built up like a nice thick layer of defense on earth like you get when you come here, a lot. You kind of get like this, like literally a thicker skin, and you just like, oh, that's just how it is here or whatever. I mean, I think we're changing that now, but what's your sense of things? I mean, I know it's been very dense and heavy. Seems like we're moving the planet up a frequency though, so it will be more amenable for these new people coming in.
Yeah, my perspective is that's what's happening, is that the earth is shifting into higher frequency, and then now we're needing to get with the program. We're needing to our systems and our ways of, like nobody teaches energy hygiene in school, do they? And so you have to like learn this outside because, so the things that actually we really need that are part of, or even nobody teaches, how to manage your finances in elementary school, or in not elementary, but maybe in high school, hardly ever, right? Like basic things, survival things, for living on the planet, for or what they call adulting, right? Like I have trouble adulting, like just kind of like becoming really, yeah, because I'm Cancer South Node, Capricorn North Node. That Capricorn organizing and getting structures and all of that, that's not natural to me, and so yeah, we have to sort of, and I mean, I think that's why a lot of these really high frequency kind of star, seeds have come to the planet, is because we're coming in this Aquarian age, and we're trying to create totally new systems and totally new ways of being that are aligned in this new frequency. We're just in that really ugly stage of where we haven't quite figured out what that's going to look like yet, and the old things are dismantling and the new things aren't coming in, and it's all just kind of like, like deciding you're going to like redo a room in your house, and you just take everything down without having had a plan first, and then there's just like this big disorganized mess everywhere. And I feel like that's kind of earth right now.
Yeah, and it's a hot mess. I mean, and and even the things that I used to do as a kid, so I'll fess up. Like as a kid in high school, I smoked pot. I smoked pot in college. I smoked a lot of pot, until I had kids, and then I smoked a little bit more. But anyway, just to be honest. But the thing is, like, did it open me up in the same way as opening up these kids? Not by a long shot. Like what's going on now is completely different. Like it is intense. It's like Mach 100 on what I was doing, And with a sensitive soul, like now you're saying not only is it more powerful than it was when I was a kid, but their defenses are way lower. They don't have the capacity to handle something like that. I don't even know if I would have the capacity to handle something like that. And I've probably been on this planet like since the beginning. So like, it's like that's intense, right?
Mhm,
How do we help our kids? Like, because now they're legalizing it everywhere. And I'm like,
mhm.
whoa, 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 wait, wait, wait. Is that really for the best? Is that what's actually happening with the kids?
Yeah, I mean, I can speak to that. You said something that is really funny because I went to see a comedian last weekend, and the opening act talked about how it's not fair that the people now who are just first trying marijuana get to try this really like souped up crazy breed of marijuana that is like more powerful than chemotherapy. It's like that's what they get to try out and start with. And when we were younger, I mean, I remember they just called it like dirt weed, and it would barely do anything to you. So you'd have to smoke like this huge amount before you really felt anything. And then, yeah, like you're saying, it does open you up. Those kind of things, there's an inherent intelligence within this planet, within this reality, within everything that you experience. There's an intelligence to it. And it's just so poignant that there are plants that you can ingest that do something to your mind, to your psyche, that allows you to see yourself in a different way than you could ever experience before. You can't, in normal conscious thinking, see yourself in the way that you experience yourself when you're on those substances. And that's a fact. You cannot do it unless you do the substance. And so once you do that, yeah, something inside of you definitely opens up. And I've had that experience, and anybody who does it has that experience. It's just what you do with that. Are you going to see reality differently than you did before? Or are you just going to think it's a game and it was just fun and that's it? So it's what you do with it. And so, yeah, in many ways, I think that there are solutions to our problems probably just within the planet itself. Just within our experience on this earth, we can solve everything that we need to. We just haven't opened ourselves up to see it yet. And the first step is, changing the way we think, changing the way we speak. Because within our language, it holds many keys to the way that our minds operate. So if your language lacks some aspect that you need, then it's very hard for you to think about that without the language to, give it a title, a name, a reality, so our language has to be modified. And that's what I love about, talking with other people, because it's not just talking. We're doing something here. We're trying to expand our sense of everything, really, of the world, by talking and experiencing it through language is the one way that we can kind of force our way to a better world. And that's just my belief. But I sort of envy people like you, like, Carrie and Tianna, because you get to speak in a different way than I'm allowed to speak. So I work a job, I live a regular everyday life. And if I go around saying the things that I really want to say, because because I've read a lot of stuff, and I feel like I know a lot of things, but I just can't articulate them in every situation because people will look at me like I'm crazy. So I have to walk this tightrope where it's like, hey, you bring up something like autism. Well, I have a theory about autism. I think it involves spirituality. But if I go around telling people that, they'll say I'm nuts. They'll say, no, it's about science. It's about biology. It's about your body. And I'll say, well, probably not. There's probably a spiritual aspect to it that we just don't understand because we don't have the language to describe it and we haven't figured it out yet. But, if I say something like that, or if I say something like, well, I feel like part of our genetics are probably modified from different entities that have been here prehistorically, and that certain DNA channels have been opened that we don't understand, then they'll look at me the same way and they'll say, wait, this is new agey bullcrap, and you must can't get away with it. So, people like you live in this realm where that's your life. That's what you deal with every day. So you're allowed to talk that way because people aren't going to really judge you the same. I think they kind of expect you to be a little bit more. I know new age, but isn't a great term, but that's the only one I can think of right now. But they kind of expect that from you. So if I go around and do that, it takes people off guard, and I guess I could, but you know what I'm saying? It's a different experience for different people and a different set of expectations, I guess.
I think it's important to make it practical for people. Like, I can just say I've witnessed up close and personal people who are highly psychic having a much easier time communicating psychically with other people that can also communicate psychically than trying to bridge to language and words. Like, language and words is really a challenge for some people that are super psychic, and like these higher beings that are coming into the planet, like they have a really hard time understanding this concept of language that's spoken. Like, it seems to be a problem, and I just noticed it because it was up close and personal. Like, that's a challenge. And I'm an author, so like words for me are like, I'm easy with words. Like I like words. I probably use too many words. you know, and I'm learning how to be more conscious with my words and maybe use fewer of them more intentionally. So mine is kind of like backing off of the words a little bit, and being a little bit more in the moment and being more intentional with my words. But some people are like, they just don't, it's like the mechanics of how to, we just take for granted, Tim, that's the thing. I think a lot of people on this planet really take for granted language. They take for granted the ability to translate a thought or an emotion or an impulse in the brain or from the spirit into their brains to create a sentence. That is just that. Some autistic people, they have a really hard time doing that basic thing that we all take for granted, think it's no big deal.
Yeah, I want to go back to something you were saying, Carrie, about so these like really psychic people, and it might be very easy for them to hear messages from other beings. And then like bridging that to the world that Tim lives, if you tell some people that's you're hearing messages in your head from other beings, people are going to think you're mentally ill, right? And there's this, I've always thought it was really interesting. There's some I don't know, where does maybe some psychic sensitivity end, and where does some mental, where's there overlap, like things that we accept now are okay, we're considered, people were put in institute, even just like a lot of like me and Carrie, maybe we would have been put in an institution.
They wanted to do that to me.
Okay, yeah, I mean, this lifetime, how crazy is that, right? So like, so we're needing to kind of explore that more. We have all these sensitive kids, and they're growing up, and then are people going to think that they're mentally ill because they say like, oh, I hear voices talking to me, or it's really interesting time on the planet where I think that hasn't really been explored enough, and it's probably going to come up more and more. All of those that like, or oh, I see someone standing there behind you, and they're like, oh my gosh, you have hallucinations, or there's something wrong with you. That's kind of an interesting area that I think is going to become more and more prevalent because more people are awakening to their spiritual abilities.
Yeah, and also the refined sensitivities. So this was something that I realized also on my journey, is that I was unaware for a long time about my impact, right? So I was not aware that not feeling my feelings was creating an impact in the space around me, right? And then I started feeling my feelings and I started opening up and becoming awakened, right? And then I started realizing that, oh my gosh, I was like an elephant in a china closet before. Like I was just stampeding through there, but I didn't know that I had a huge tidal wave. Like every time I moved, it created a tidal wave for some people in my environment. And it's like starting to realize like grounding, how important, like that's why I love Tim's energy. It's like being super, super grounded and really calm is so
Mhm.
helpful for people who are psychically sensitive. And animals actually show us this. Animals reveal it to us. Because when you have a super sensitive animal, the animal will kind of be very jittery around certain people, and in certain environments they'll get really like unsafe or kind of hyper vigilant, or really like showing signs of distress. And that is a sign, if you have an animal in your environment like that, that you're actually in distress, but you just don't know it. Like your body is actually in distress, and the family system or whatever the environment is in distress. And it's actually important to realize that your body is also an animal, and if it's disconnected or it's not safe or it doesn't feel that harmonic connection with earth, like we're it's in separation, it's in fear, it's in scarcity, it's in survival, it's going to be really scared, just like the animal you're witnessing, and it's going to be jittery and trying to like find some way to be safe. And I think that's the more refined we get in our sensitivities, kind of unclogging ourselves of the mud, the unconscious mud. And it's like starting to really feel and perceive again in our bodies. We can become aware of what our kids, these young kids, are actually already aware of coming in. And this is why people like that start putting on layers of mud and protection, is because it's very stressful to be around all of this really hectic energy on the planet.
I think that's such a really good point of something that we could do for the younger generation. Because now that you're mentioning it, so like teaching them to be outside and be in the earth to help them get grounded, because now that you're mentioning, I'm thinking of like, because this whole generation has spent all of this time, they're learning on Zoom, and they're spending all their time on video games, and even when they're in person in school, there's no more recess, and so they don't have the groundedness that we got from nature, from spending out time, and when we were younger, it was okay to go outside and play with the neighborhood kids, and now, oh, it's not safe or whatever. And so they're just like, they're inside and they're on these electronic devices all day, and they don't have that time and that energy. I remember when we had the animal communicator on our podcast, and she was saying, like, if one thing for sure to do if your animal's not well is get them outside. Nature really heals them. Just give them a lot of time. And I think,
That is
like you
true.
said, we're animals too. You're using this example of like, being the calm leader of your pet and so forth. And it's the same thing, like, just like animals, we need to be outside. And so maybe just creating more opportunities for our young people to have outside time, and spending time in nature could really help them.
I want to really validate what you said about that, because when my dog called Daddy, he was from my first marriage. Anyway, Daddy dog, and he was getting up in age, right? And he was starting to have problems like standing up, and his hips were unstable and things like that. But he was spending a lot of time inside. And I just kind of tuned in, and I was like, I think he needs to be outside. And so I started putting him outside more, like just be outside. The weather was nice, he could be outside. And so he decided he wanted to like lay on the dirt in this one area of the yard. And he just would always go to that dirt, and he would lie down and he'd get himself all dirty, which was like, oh my God, this dog is dirty now. But he loved to be on the dirt. And so he'd roll around in it, and then he'd find a comfortable spot. And he started healing his own hips. Like his hips got better. He got stronger. He was digging. He got happier. Like, and that probably added like 2 years onto his life just by putting him outside. And he eventually did kind of wear out his vessel, and because of all the animals, I realized, are like they're so sensitive, and they're such helping spirits that they'll actually take on in their bodies traumas and things that are unhealed in the family system in order to support the humans who are being unconscious and don't know it. And they'll take stuff on for us. And so that's what happened with Daddy. Eventually it wore him out, but he was so good outside in nature, and he really, he got rejuvenated, and he had 2 more years of life, So I fully believe that, like, it's important to be grounded and connected with Mama Earth.
Yeah, it makes me
Oh,
think of that. Oh yeah, I'm sorry too. I
no,
was
go
gonna say
ahead.
that earthing documentary, the same
Yeah.
kind of thing where they had them go out. Anyway, what were you gonna say, Tim?
Oh, I was just gonna say, yeah, it's totally right. The animal psychic that came on the podcast was great. She did talk about that. And then we also had in my family, we had another person talk about our cat. He was a psychic, but he came on our podcast to talk about a near death experience. And so this guy had the most insane near death experience you've ever heard, and he was so popular on our podcast. His episode just, I think honestly, his episode has more listens than all the other ones combined. I
That's
mean, his following is huge now. And so anyway, his name is Vinny. He talked about his past life regression. Anyway, we had a psychic session with him. We kind of became friends with him, and he gave us a session. My family, all three of us, we had a session, and somehow the cats. We have two cats. We had two cats at that time. We still do, but it's a new one now. But one of the cats had she was sick, and he told us, oh no, there's nothing wrong with her, she just takes on all of your energy, and she's like processing it for you. And he's like, just she'll be better by tomorrow. But yeah, she like absorbed all this weird stuff that was happening with you guys, and she like processed it for you. And I look at that cat all the time, and she really does do that. It's so funny because if one of us is upset, she'll be there. She'll be right there, like maybe not on your lap or something, but she'll be right by you. And it's just so odd how she seems to know who is like going through something because she'll be right there. And I feel like she's helping somehow, is helping us work through it. So animals are super interesting. They have a really deep connection to everything, to not just the earth, right? Like they're connected. Like they're on a different level than we are. Like cuz we have the veil, but animals don't have the veil. They are able to experience things psychically that we cannot do because it's against the rules for us, right? Like we need to learn our lessons, and they're not here for that. They're here for a different reason. So they're connected to all this. They know what's going on. And so animals are very interesting. I notice now in my life many synchronicities that happen with animals and plants and things like that and insects, because I think because of that, I think because they are so connected to the source, that they are here to help us to pass messages, to process energy, to do all these kind of things. So yeah, and nature is super important. It's really a big part of, like, I think what we're here to understand. It's got all the answers for sure.
Yeah, and I think a lot more time in nature is really good for our kids and for ourselves, our own sanity. I know I feel better after I sit on my front lawn for a few hours. You know, I'll go sit out there. Everyone thinks I'm weird, but I'm like, I don't care. I'm sitting out on Mother Nature, and I'll just sit out there and just sit, and then I'll feel better after a little while. It feels like she takes the heaviness and I release it, and then I'll feel a little bit better. And it's so important, I think, like to realize that we're all connected, right? Like, because yeah, if we have a family, let's say somebody in the family is upset, the cat feels it, but the cat's not the only one that feels it. Like we all feel it, we feel that person going through something, and some piece of us is tuning into that and wanting to help, wanting to help. And if we have difficult family situations, it makes it hard on the most sensitive ones within the family to be well.
For sure. Yeah. Yeah, I kind of want to know, like, it's interesting. I don't know why this is coming up in my mind, but I'm going to bring it up. So I know that I know you had an awakening in your life, Carrie, where it was a lot of turmoil, right? Like a lot of like super heavy things happened, and it was very dramatic, and I feel like that's the way for a lot of people. A lot of people come into their spiritual path through some kind of chaos, right? Some kind of disturbance, major disturbance in their life, and then that opens them and wakes them up somehow. And I'm sure Tianna probably has a ton of stories where she had clients like come to her like that, and that was their experience. And I think mine was a little different. I didn't really have anything crumble and fall apart, but I did have a lot of weird you know things, information, I guess, come into my life where it started to make me realize. And it was more like, instead of a big, super big event that kind of changed things for me. It was more of like a chipping away, and it just like kind of like soaked in, and then finally like hit the core, and I was like, okay, I get it. But yeah, but I just want to say, one of the main things that did that for me was, I had some psychedelic experiences that obviously opened me up, but the main thing that really did it for me was I found this text, and it was called the Law of One. And I don't know if anyone's heard of the Law of
I
One.
think I have, but go ahead, say more.
Yeah, it's a very interesting text. It was written in the late 70s and early 80s by a group of three people. And apparently these three people they had such a like a connection or a relationship with one another, and their spirits were of such a vibration that they were able to channel this material. And apparently the beings who channeled it through them had been waiting for a configuration of entities like them for thousands of years. They waited for thousands of years for them to appear, and they did. And then they channeled it through them. And so this was one of the first channeling, like very popular channeled materials that ever came out, at least in the Western world. And yeah, they spent, I forget how many months channeling, like every few days that one of the women would go into a trance, a full trance. She would be under and she would not remember anything that she spoke about. And they just asked every kind of question that they could think of. And what they were initially, these three people were UFO researchers, and they started researching UFOs, and they found out that many of the people who claim to be abductees actually, sorry, my cat's in the background. I don't know if you're hearing
I can hear it.
that.
Yeah.
So, um, so many of these people who were abductees claimed that they had a psychic connection with the entities that abducted them, and that psychic connection lasted the rest of their lives. They felt like they could communicate with these beings forever after that, and so they thought that was super interesting, and so they set out to initiate contact with these beings. That was the whole purpose of them trying to channel. They were even coming up with the techniques that many people use now to channel. And so they channeled this material, and it came from a group of beings called Ra, ARA, the Ra beings. And they claimed that they were beings that lived on Venus many, many millions of years ago, and that they were going through the same process that we're going through now, and that they actually lifted their culture, their society, their whole group of beings to the next level, much like exactly how we're doing now. And they described like all the things that would help us to do that in a much more like smooth and harmonious way. Apparently it was pretty easy for them. Like they didn't have the level of negativity that we do on the planet, and so their experience with going through the transition was much easier than ours. It was a lot more harmonious, and so they were here to help us, and they're still here, and they still try to. So I just felt like I should mention that. I don't know why it just came up. I wanted to talk about it.
No, that's beautiful. I mean, I know we have lots of support. I mean, everybody's got a whole spirit team. You know, I started walking around when I first realized I had a spirit team, and I started talking to people about my mystical path and all this. And I'd say, well, you have a spirit team. And they'd say, no, I don't. And I'd say, okay, if you don't want to talk to them, they can come work for me for now. Then they started getting interested in having their spirit team because they're like, what do you mean? You're going to take my people? I'm like, yeah, if you're not going to use them, I'm going to take them.
Thought of that. That's hilarious.
Inspiring people to not have their spirit team be stolen from them. So every day, all day long, carry hummingbird. So,
Yeah, it makes me sad that, that's not common knowledge, right? Or some people don't trust. They're like, I think my higher self doesn't like me, or, my higher self is, is mean to me, or I don't deserve, the guidance of my heart. I think they're really disappointed, and so they won't talk to me. And I'm like, no, that's not the level that they operate from.
no, that's ego.
Yeah, yeah.
Not to shame ego either. I mean, that's the thing is we created this opportunity, and everybody has a life journey, right? So I want to say that everybody's got a life journey, but it's also like Tim was saying, like if we can make there be less suffering in the process of the awakening, wouldn't that be nice to have less suffering and more grace and more harmony in the transition into soul-led living from ego-led living? And I just think it would be nice if we could make that happen with each other and clean up some of the psychic entanglements and, keep elevating our refinement of understanding of what that even means, what I just said, right? Like, do you even know what that means?
That's why it's so important that, that we talk about these things, because like I didn't even feel comfortable talking about this kind of stuff when I first started on my spiritual journey. And yeah, there's like a deep, like, across maybe lifetimes fear of like something really bad is going to happen to me if I talk about these things. And even now, I've been working on that for so long, but there's still levels of, my spiritual experience that I haven't shared, that it feels scary and vulnerable to do that. And it's funny because right now I'm starting to work on my second book, and I'm like, I could feel it because it's like pretty vulnerable. And I'm like, oh my gosh, it's going to be really like, what if so-and-so reads this? Or what if so-and-so? And I'm like, it doesn't matter if they don't, even like my dad's not going to understand this. Like, like that's okay. But as we do that, then we normalize it more, right? Because that's what's been happening since social media and, and YouTube and people having podcasts and all of that. More people are feeling empowered to kind of speak their experience and speak their truth. And each time we do that, it helps. So like for the next generation, that's what we're doing, is we're kind of speaking all of our messy stuff, just like your journey was messy and so was mine. And we just have to talk about that. And like, yeah, we don't always know what we're doing, and we didn't always do it right, but that's okay. Like, we're learning through the experience. And then that kind of sets or paves a way for the next generation to feel, okay, you're not here. I'm constantly working with clients. You're not here to be perfect. You're here to learn and grow, and learning and growing is messy. It means, we should make mistakes, because that means we're trying something new. And we just keep trying to learn from those mistakes and understand through our trial and error. And so I don't think that we're meant to have all of the answers for the next generation, but we can create an environment and a society where it's safe, hopefully, for them to speak out, speak up to us about how the things that they're struggling with, or they can see us and see that we've gone through our own journey, but hey, look, we turned out kind of okay now. And so, like, yeah, I think that that's all right. I know I don't have all the answers. I don't know about you guys, but
Yeah, I definitely don't. And that's the thing, is like, if we could just look at ourselves and say, hey, we don't have all the answers. We have a whole generation struggling. Maybe we need to take a look at that and see how we're doing it that might not be so beneficial anymore, and be willing to change it, right? Rather than trying to force them to come along and do it this way, that's obviously painful for them and difficult for them, is that we could actually, and then we might find out, oh, wait a second, I didn't actually enjoy that either. Like, oh, I didn't want that model either. Oh, I like this new model better. So in some ways, the younger people, the ones that are coming in that are so sensitive, they can teach us so much more about being human as well. And if we can just listen to what they're saying, and do our best to modify our systems and the way our expectations, and create some new structures and systems and environments to support them in being healthy and happy. Yeah, we might be happier too.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we can, and I think we will.
I think there is enough of them, we will, right? If there's enough of an epidemic, that's one thing about humans, I can talk some smack about humanity. It's easy, but we can also just go, wow, humans usually, typically, they'll fix it somehow. Like, they'll just go, okay, what is going on here? How can we make this better? What is the solution? And I like that. Like, we will, as a species, generally dig in and find a solution. That's what I appreciate about humanity. We don't always do it right the first time, or the second time, or the 50th time, or the thousandth lifetime. But we will eventually find a solution, and we will embrace it, and then that becomes a new norm. We're really good at making things a new norm. So I'm actually happy about that. I know we're going to do it this way too.
yeah, I think that we live in a time where there's a lot more freedom to innovate and try new things, and more openness to that, whereas in other lifetimes or other times on the planet, they were probably really resistant to change. And I think it's pretty broadly accepted that we're in kind of a crisis point on the planet, and that things need to shift. And we won't all agree on what those things are and how we're going to do it, but I think that there is enough of a overall willingness that, yeah, we need to adapt or die. We need to adapt to survive as a species on the planet. So yeah, hopefully that, pushes us to come together more and find more integration versus the polarization that we've been really heavily experiencing in the last number of years.
Yeah. And lots of forgiveness work too, like really clearing the energies around it, clearing our own self-judgments for what we didn't know that we did. And they know not what they do. Let's go back to the master, like, we don't know until we experience it. And then we go, huh, that wasn't the best idea. Let me try something new, right? And that's what I appreciate about humans, is that we're always striving to be better, and that's awesome. Yeah. Well, this feels like this was a really interesting, good conversation. I feel like I hope that anyone who's identifies as really sensitive and a new soul and, new to the planet feels really heard and seen through what we talked about today. And I hope that all the rest of us feel like we learned something like, oh, that's how it must be for them. Yeah, let's get more refined. Let's get more sensitive. Let's get more vulnerable and transparent and see what more beauty we can create together. Sounds good. Thanks for coming on the show, you guys. Is there anything you want to share on the way out? Any last things that are coming through from either one of you?
Thanks so much for having us. No deep words of, I'm for once I'm at a loss of something to
If you're at a
say.
loss of words, that's the end of it. All right. Well,
I'll
then
psychically transmit it to you.
please later on. I'm sure I'll get that in my dreams. Okay, you guys, thanks for coming out. And I just want to share with everybody else here, if you liked this broadcast, please share it out. Please like, subscribe, and comment. Let us some feedback. Let us know what you thought. And let's give kisses, everybody. We're going to give everybody's kisses if you guys want to join us. Here comes the kisses. We love you all. Everyone's doing their best. And we'll see you next week on Soul Nectar Show. Bye for now, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
If you found even one gold nugget in this episode of Soul Nectar Show, will you do us a favor? Will you subscribe, like, and share this episode? Maybe even write a comment and let us know what you thought about it. We really, really want to engage with you at a much deeper level. Let's be part of community together. Have a great week, everyone. Bye for now. To dive in deeper to nourishing conversation, visit soulnectar.show.
Soul Nectar Show. Awaken, awake, Nectar Show. Take a sip from the drip of nectar, from the source of who you are.